What happens when Hollywood's most unforgettable faces try to outrun time? Sometimes they look incredible. Sometimes, even their old headshots might need a name tag. From Daryl Hannah to Madonna 15, legendary beauties faced transformations nobody saw coming. And behind a few of them are stories far crazier than the photos. Wait until you hear what happened to number one. Number 1. Donna Mills. If Daryl Hannah was Hollywood's mysterious mermaid, Donna Mills was the woman who could destroy you with one look and somehow make you thank her for it. As the calculating Abby Cunningham on Knots Landing, Donna became one of the defining faces of 1980s primetime television. Her cat-shaped eyes were so iconic that, according to the original story, women across America went to makeup counters asking for the Donna Mills look. Add porcelain skin, razor-sharp features, and a perfectly defined jawline, and Abby didn't need a weapon. She had cheekbones. But unlike Daryl, Donna never disappeared from public view, and that meant audiences had decades to watch her appearance evolve. The original story describes the precise angular structure that once defined her face becoming noticeably softer and rounder over time, a contrast that longtime Knots Landing fans found striking. Donna has remained private about any cosmetic journey, so there's no confession to dramatically pull from a vault. What remains is the visible contrast presented by the story, and the question Hollywood always seems obsessed with asking, how do you age when millions of people still remember your face from 40 years ago? Here's the detail that makes Donna's story more interesting than any before and after photo. The original piece says she had meaningful creative influence over Abby Cunningham's storylines, during an era when actresses rarely received that kind of behind-the-scenes power. In other words, Donna wasn't simply the beautiful villain standing under perfect studio lighting. She was helping shape the woman audiences loved to hate. Beauty made people look, but intelligence helped make Abby unforgettable. And if Donna's transformation got fans talking, the next woman had a completely different strategy. She didn't hide from the conversation. She practically grabbed the microphone. Number 2. Vivica A. Fox. If confidence had a Hollywood address, Vivica A. Fox probably owned the penthouse. In 1996's Independence Day, she played Jasmine, opposite Will Smith, and somehow survived Aliens explosions and peak 90s blockbuster chaos without losing an ounce of attitude. Then came Set It Off, followed by Vernita Green in Kill Bill Volume 1, where Vivica proved she could go from glamorous to dangerous before most people finished their morning coffee. With radiant skin, a brilliant smile, and a sharply defined jawline, she didn't just enter a scene, she arrived like the scene had been waiting for her. Years later, fans noticed her appearance had changed. The original story describes a fuller mid-face and softer contours, replacing some of the sharp definition audiences remembered. Cue the internet detectives zooming into red carpet photos like somebody had hidden the nuclear codes in her cheekbones. But Vivica wasn't interested in playing Hollywood's favorite game of deny, disappear, repeat. Her philosophy was simple: if you're comfortable with what you choose and you love the result, that's what matters. While strangers argued over screenshots, Vivica kept moving forward with the same confidence that made her famous. And then comes the most Vivica detail imaginable. According to the original story, she turned an entire bedroom into a professional glam room so she could wake up and feel like a superstar every day. Forget a vanity mirror, this woman basically built her own backstage. Love the choices or question them, Vivica never surrendered the thing that mattered most: ownership of her own image. And if you think that's bold, buckle up. Because next comes Janice Dickinson, a woman who never merely entered a controversy. She kicked down the door and asked where the cameras were. Number 3. Janice Dickinson. Before Instagram, before influencers, before people could start a scandal from their phones, Janice Dickinson was already doing it professionally. Throughout the 70s and 80s, she became one of fashion's most recognizable personalities and famously proclaimed herself the world's first supermodel. Later, America's next top model introduced a new generation to what the fashion industry already knew. Janice did not come with a mute button. In her modeling prime, razor-sharp cheekbones, a sculpted jaw, and naturally full lips gave her the kind of face photographers built entire shoots around. She didn't need a filter. Filters would have needed Janice. But the pursuit of perfection became part of her story. Over the decades, the original piece describes increasingly dramatic changes to her appearance, particularly much fuller lips and features that looked heavily lifted compared with the sharp angles of her youth. Janice naturally had her own version of events, insisting she had perfect bone structure and defending her cheeks and lips. The public debate never really stopped, and with Janice, even a beauty question could somehow turn into a season finale. Then came Botched. Janice appeared on the reality series seeking replacement of a decades-old breast implant. But the recovery became almost as dramatic as the procedure. According to the original story, she later accused the surgeon of botching the operation. The doctor pushed back, alleging that Janice removed her own surgical drains and continued smoking during recovery. Flowers rest, quiet healing, apparently not on the Janice Dickinson schedule. Yet beneath the chaos is a woman who built a career by refusing to be forgettable. And the next story couldn't be more different, because when Kim Novak returned to the Oscar stage, the laughter disappeared. Number 4. Kim Novak. Hollywood spent decades telling women not to age, and then acted shocked when they tried not to. Few stories expose that contradiction more painfully than Kim Novak's. In Alfred Hitchcock's 1958 masterpiece, Vertigo, she played the haunting dual role that turned her into the ultimate Hitchcock blonde, mysterious, sensual, almost unreal. With arched brows, soft cheeks, and an elegance that required no Instagram filter, mostly because Instagram was about 50 years late, Kim became one of classic Hollywood's unforgettable faces. Then came the 2014 Academy Awards. At 81, Kim walked onto the stage to present an award, and instead of celebrating a screen legend, much of the conversation immediately centered on her appearance. The original story describes her face as noticeably fuller and less expressive, with changes around her lips and cheeks drawing intense public attention. Photos raced across the internet, commentary exploded, and suddenly a woman celebrated for Vertigo more than half a century earlier was being judged frame by frame. Hollywood wanted eternal youth and apparently expected the receipt to be invisible. But that reaction ignored the woman behind the photographs. According to the original piece, Kim had survived breast cancer, lived through a severe horse riding accident, dealt with bipolar disorder, and had already left Hollywood behind for a quieter life on a ranch where she painted and cared for animals. She didn't return to that Oscar stage as a 1958 movie poster. She returned as an 81-year-old survivor. Maybe the shocking part wasn't how Kim Novak looked that night. It was how quickly people forgot everything she had lived through. And next, we meet another television icon whose story takes a very different turn, Heather Locklear. Do you think Kim Novak was judged too harshly that night? Or was the public reaction understandable? Drop your take in the comments. Number 5. Heather Locklear. There was a time when Heather Locklear practically owned American primetime television, as Sammy Jo on Dynasty And later, the ruthless Amanda Woodward on Melrose Place, she could enter a scene and make everyone else look like they'd accidentally wandered onto the wrong set. Golden hair, dazzling eyes, naturally high cheekbones, and a sleek jawline made Heather one of television's defining beauties. Amanda Woodward could ruin your career before lunch and somehow still have perfect hair by dinner. But behind that glamorous image, Heather's life became far more complicated. The original story specifically points to her struggle with addiction and the difficult process of recovery. At the same time, resurfaced photos showed a Heather who looked noticeably different from the woman audiences remembered on Melrose Place, with her once sharp facial structure appearing softer and rounder. Fans focused on the transformation, but Heather had been dealing with something far more serious than red carpet photographs, rebuilding her life after addiction. Instead of pretending those difficult years never happened, the story emphasizes that she later spoke openly about her recovery and reflected on the choices and experiences that had changed her appearance and her life. That's why Heather's story isn't really about cheekbones. It's about making it through a chapter that could have swallowed everything else. By 2025, the original piece presents her as a woman willing to acknowledge that she went through difficult times and came out the other side. Hollywood can manufacture a comeback with lighting makeup and a perfectly timed magazine cover, but recovery doesn't work that way. Heather had to live hers. And after that heavy chapter, the next legend brings something completely different to the screen: Goldie Hawn, a woman whose greatest beauty secret may have been impossible to bottle pure joy. Number 6. Goldie Hawn. Goldie Hawn never needed to walk into a room quietly. Her laugh usually got there first. From winning an Oscar for Cactus Flower to turning Private Benjamin and Overboard into comedy classics, Goldie built her image around something Hollywood couldn't manufacture: in a surgeon's office, pure, contagious joy. Those bright blue eyes, tousled blonde hair, and mischievous grin made her feel less like an untouchable movie star and more like the funniest woman at the party. Goldie wasn't simply beautiful. She looked like she knew a joke about everyone in the room and was deciding whether to tell it. Decades later, however, the conversation shifted. The original story points to her Oscar appearances in 2024 and 2025, where viewers noticed a smoother forehead, fuller cheeks, and more volume around her lips than in earlier years. Suddenly, the woman famous for making audiences smile became another target of Hollywood's favorite pastime, comparing a woman in her 70s to photographs taken when she was 30. Goldie hasn't publicly detailed specific procedures, leaving the speculation exactly where it belongs as speculation. And maybe that's the bigger joke Hollywood demands: women stay young forever, then acts surprised when aging doesn't look exactly the way it expected. But Goldie's real story has always been bigger than a red carpet close-up. The original piece highlights her decades-long relationship with Kurt Russell and the family they built without ever needing a marriage certificate to prove it. It also points to her support for daughter Kate Hudson, including Goldie cheering her on at major premieres. After more than half a century in show business, Goldie's most recognizable feature may still be the same one she started with: that enormous smile. But the next woman's story carries a much sharper warning, because Emmanuelle Béart openly revealed the decision she wishes she could take back. Number 7. Daryl Hannah. Imagine being so striking that Hollywood cast you as a mermaid, and audiences basically said, "Of course. Who else? That was Daryl Hannah." She had already turned heads as the mysterious replicant Pris in Ridley Scott's Blade Runner in 1982. But Splash in 1984 made her a full-blown star. Playing Madison opposite Tom Hanks, Daryl became one of the defining blonde beauties of the decade. And it wasn't some cookie-cutter Hollywood face, piercing blue eyes. Wild blonde hair, high cheekbones, and a razor-sharp jawline gave her a look you could recognize in seconds. Hollywood spends fortunes trying to manufacture that kind of face. Daryl simply showed up with it. Years later, however, fans began noticing that those famously sharp features appeared softer and fuller, fueling years of speculation about cosmetic work. But here's the important part. Daryl herself has remained private about any procedures, so there's no dramatic confession to point to. What is clear is that she gradually moved away from the Hollywood spotlight and became increasingly associated with environmental activism. The woman who once commanded blockbuster screens was suddenly living a very different kind of public life. And maybe that's the irony. While everyone was busy analyzing her face, Daryl seemed far more interested in what was happening to the planet. Then there's the chapter that sounds like it came straight from a Hollywood screenplay. During the height of her fame, Daryl had a highly publicized relationship with John F. Kennedy Jr., one of the most watched bachelors in America. The original story also connects her to Carolyn Bessette Kennedy, describing Carolyn as an admirer of Daryl's style within New York's fashion world. Think about that resume: Blade Runner splash, Tom Hanks, JFK Jr. Hollywood fame, then environmental activism. Daryl Hannah didn't need a scandal to have an extraordinary story. But if her transformation made people look twice, the next woman stayed right in front of the cameras, and that made every change much harder to ignore. Number 8. Emmanuelle Béart. Some faces look so perfectly cinematic that changing anything feels like editing a masterpiece, and Emmanuelle Béart was one of them. The French actress captivated audiences in Manon des Sources before reaching international screens in 1996's Mission Impossible, starring alongside Tom Cruise. With piercing blue eyes, delicate features, and naturally full lips, Béart had the kind of beauty that made French elegance feel less like a phrase and more like an unfair genetic advantage. Hollywood had special effects. France apparently just had Emmanuelle. But at around 27, she made a decision she would later speak about with striking regret. According to the original story, Béart had work done on her lips, and she later said the result went badly. Over time, the delicate balance that once defined her face appeared noticeably altered, especially around her lips and cheeks. Unlike celebrities who dodged the question with sleep water and good genes, Béart addressed her experience openly. She acknowledged the procedure and described it as something she wished she had approached differently, turning what could have remained celebrity gossip into a much more personal warning. And that's what makes her story hit differently. Béart didn't simply admit she regretted a cosmetic choice. The original piece says she later used her experience to warn others about procedures that can create lasting consequences. Her message was brutally simple: understand what you're doing before making a change that may be difficult or impossible to reverse. In an industry obsessed with looking flawless, admitting regret may have required more courage than pretending everything was perfect. And if Emmanuelle chose to talk, the next actress did almost the opposite. Lara Flynn Boyle stepped away and left Hollywood with questions she never publicly answered. Number 9. Lara Flynn Boyle. One day, Lara Flynn Boyle was everywhere. Then Hollywood looked around, and she was practically gone. In the early 90s, Twin Peaks made her unforgettable as Donna Hayward, the small-town beauty trapped inside one of television's strangest mysteries. Later came The Practice and Men in Black 2, cementing Lara as a familiar face on both television and movie screens. With porcelain skin, piercing eyes, sculpted cheekbones, and a razor-sharp jawline, she had a look built for close-ups. On Twin Peaks, even the owls were mysterious, but Lara's cheekbones needed no investigation. Years later, however, public attention shifted from her acting to her appearance. The original story describes her face becoming noticeably fuller, with changes around her cheeks and lips, drawing intense speculation. Then came another twist. Lara largely stepped away from the spotlight. Unlike celebrities who explain every transformation on podcasts, talk shows, and Instagram, she remained intensely private and never publicly confirmed what cosmetic procedures, if any, were behind those changes. Hollywood kept asking questions. Lara simply didn't provide the answers. But her Twin Peaks years came with their own behind-the-scenes intrigue. The original piece says Lara dated co-star Kyle MacLachlan, and that their relationship reportedly influenced the show itself, with Lara allegedly uncomfortable about a planned romance between his character and another young female character. Whether on screen or off, mystery seemed to follow her. Then she did something Hollywood rarely forgives. She stopped feeding the machine. And next comes Melanie Griffith, whose first major facial procedure, according to the original story, began not with vanity, but with an accident. So far, whose transformation shocked you the most? Drop their name in the comments below, and let's see which Hollywood face gets mentioned the most. Number 10. Melanie Griffith. Melanie Griffith had the kind of face Hollywood loves to put in a close-up, soft, glamorous, and just mischievous enough to suggest trouble was probably 5 minutes away. In 1988's Working Girl, her performance as Tess McGill earned her an Oscar nomination and turned her into one of the era's most recognizable stars. With expressive eyes, full lips, and that unmistakable, breathy voice, Melanie didn't look manufactured. She looked effortlessly movie star famous. But behind that famous face was a detail most audiences never knew. According to the original story, Melanie's first major facial procedure wasn't about chasing youth at all. As a teenager, she suffered a serious accident that injured her face and required reconstructive surgery. That history adds a very different context to what came later. Over the years, her appearance changed more dramatically, with the original piece describing fuller lips, smoother skin, and altered facial contours. Predictably, Hollywood turned those changes into headlines. Because apparently, if you're famous long enough, strangers eventually believe your face becomes a public group project. But Melanie's story didn't stop with the mirror. The original piece connects her legacy to daughter Dakota Johnson, who later recreated one of her mother's iconic fashion moments as a tribute. It's a fitting full-circle image, one generation remembered for Working Girl, another carrying a piece of that Hollywood history forward. Melanie's transformation may have fueled years of conversation, but the beginning of her story wasn't vanity, it was reconstruction after an injury. And next comes Lisa Rinna, whose cosmetic journey began with something far more unexpected, a movie and actress, and one pair of lips she couldn't forget. Number 11. Lisa Rinna. Lisa Rinna's lips became so famous, they practically deserved their own Hollywood agent. Long before The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills, she was turning heads on Days of Our Lives and Melrose Place, where her huge smile, sharp cheekbones, and unmistakable energy made her impossible to ignore. But the feature that eventually became her trademark didn't start as some carefully planned celebrity brand. According to the original story, it started when 24-year-old Lisa watched the movie Beaches and became fascinated by Barbara Hershey's fuller lips. Most people watch a movie and buy popcorn. Lisa apparently left with inspiration for a whole new look. She decided to have permanent silicone injected into her upper lip. At first, the result gave her exactly what she wanted: a fuller pout that eventually became inseparable from the Lisa Rinna image. But permanent means permanent, And years later, the original story says the silicone began causing problems, including hardening and scar tissue. Her upper lip became increasingly enlarged and uneven, turning what began as a beauty decision into something she could no longer simply ignore. Eventually, Lisa underwent reconstructive surgery to remove damaged tissue and reshape the lip. And that's what makes Lisa's story more than another Hollywood transformation. She didn't hide the origin of her famous lips. She spoke about it publicly, including what happened when that decision created complications years later. One movie, one beauty inspiration, one permanent choice and consequences that lasted decades. It's almost a perfect Hollywood cautionary tale. Sometimes the feature that makes you famous can also become the one you have to repair. But if Lisa's story sounds risky, the next one gets darker because Priscilla Presley says she trusted the wrong person with her face. Number 12, Priscilla Presley. Before influencers had glam squads and celebrities had beauty brands, Priscilla Presley was already living inside America's ultimate spotlight. She married Elvis Presley at just 21 and became instantly recognizable beside the king of rock and roll with jet black hair, dramatic eyeliner, and porcelain features that helped define an entire era of glamour. But Priscilla eventually built an identity beyond Graceland, appearing in Dallas and showing off her comic side in the Naked Gun films. She didn't just marry an icon, she became one, and staying camera-ready for decades, Hollywood treats that like an Olympic event with better jewelry. Then the story took a disturbing turn. According to the original piece, Priscilla became involved with Daniel Serrano, who hosted private injection parties for wealthy Beverly Hills clients. The substance was presented as a premium cosmetic treatment, but the story says it was actually industrial-grade silicone. After receiving injections, Priscilla reportedly developed lumps and facial irregularities that later required corrective procedures. What sounded like an exclusive beauty treatment had become something far more serious, and suddenly, this wasn't celebrity gossip anymore. The aftermath changed the way Priscilla's transformation was understood. The original story says she underwent multiple corrective procedures, while Serrano was eventually convicted and imprisoned. That context matters. The visible changes people discussed weren't simply about vanity or chasing youth. They were tied to a treatment she reportedly received under misleading circumstances. It's a brutal reminder that in Hollywood, even exclusive can sometimes mean run. And if Priscilla's story is about trusting the wrong person, the next one is about realizing you've gone too far yourself, because Courtney Cox eventually looked at her fillers and decided enough was enough. Number 13, Courtney Cox. For 10 seasons of Friends, Courtney Cox played Monica Geller, a woman so obsessed with perfection that even her towels had categories. Ironically, years later, Courtney would find herself confronting a very real version of that same pressure. From Friends to Scream, her piercing blue eyes, high cheekbones, and sharply defined jaw made her one of the most recognizable faces of the 90s. Then fans noticed something changing. Her cheeks looked fuller, her features smoother, and suddenly the internet was studying her face harder than Ross ever studied dinosaurs. But Courtney eventually admitted something many celebrities wouldn't. She felt she had gone too far with fillers. According to the original story, she described it as a domino effect. You make one small change, get used to it, then someone suggests another, and because you see yourself every day, you don't realize how dramatically your appearance is shifting. Eventually, Courtney looked at herself and realized she no longer felt like the woman staring back. That realization changed everything. Instead of doubling down, Courtney reversed course. She had her fillers dissolved and publicly embraced a more natural appearance, even acknowledging that some of her earlier choices had been mistakes. In Hollywood, where pretending you just drink water practically deserves its own acting award, that honesty stood out. Her story became less about trying to stop aging and more about recognizing when enough was enough. But next comes Meg Ryan, America's rom-com sweetheart, whose changing appearance became almost as discussed as the movies that made her famous. Number 14, Meg Ryan. For an entire generation, falling in love at the movies looked a lot like Meg Ryan. In When Harry Met Sally, Sleepless in Seattle, and You've Got Mail, she became America's rom-com sweetheart, the woman with sparkling blue eyes, a crooked smile, and that perfectly imperfect blonde hair that somehow looked adorable even when it appeared to have survived a small electrical storm. Meg didn't need superhero movies or explosions. Give her a coffee shop, one complicated man, and 5 minutes of screen time, and America was emotionally invested. But years later, the conversation around Meg changed dramatically. The original story points to public appearances where fans noticed fuller cheeks, smoother skin, and more pronounced lips compared with the delicate features they remembered from her 80s and 90s films. Speculation followed, but Meg largely avoided publicly detailing specific cosmetic procedures. And that silence only made the fascination louder. Hollywood had spent decades preserving her as the eternal girl from the romantic comedy, then seemed surprised when the real woman continued aging outside the final credits. Yet there's much more to Meg Ryan than the face on a movie poster. Before Hollywood took over, the original piece says she studied journalism at New York University and originally pursued acting simply to help pay her college bills. Even Meg Ryan was part of the transformation. She was born Margaret Hyra and later adopted the shorter stage name audiences would know around the world. She went from journalism student to America's sweetheart almost by accident.